The morning sun barely peeked through the thick clouds when Marcus heard the crash. He was already awake, sitting on the edge of his broken bed, staring at the pile of overdue bills scattered across his small wooden table. The bank notice sat on top, bold red letters spelling out his doom. Final notice, foreclosure in 30 days. Marcus rubbed his weathered hands across his face. 20 years of farming the same patch of rocky soil, and he had nothing to show for it except calloused palms and mounting debt. His crops had failed 3 seasons in a row due to strange weather patterns. First came the drought that lasted 6 months, then the floods that washed away his seedlings, and finally, the early frost that killed everything he had managed to grow. The crash came again, louder this time, followed by what sounded like a woman's voice crying out in pain. Marcus grabbed his old hunting rifle from above the fireplace and stepped outside his small farmhouse. The sound had come from the forest behind his property, where the trees grew so thick that sunlight barely reached the ground. As he walked toward the woods, Marcus noticed something odd. The trees at the edge of the forest were bent and broken, as if something enormous had fallen through them. Branches that would normally be 20 feet above his head now hung at eye level, snapped and twisted in ways that made no sense. He followed the trail of destruction deeper into the forest. The damage was incredible. Trees that had stood for decades were uprooted and lying on their sides. Boulders the size of his truck had been moved from their resting places. Whatever had caused this destruction was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Then he saw her. The woman was lying in a small clearing where several massive oak trees had been completely flattened. But calling her a woman seemed inadequate. She was at least 12 feet tall, with long silver hair that sparkled even in the dim forest light. Her skin had a pale blue tint, and she wore what appeared to be armor made from some kind of white metal that Marcus had never seen before. Blood seeped from a large wound on her shoulder, staining her beautiful armor. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was shallow. Around her neck hung a pendant that glowed with a soft golden light, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Marcus approached carefully, his rifle ready but pointed toward the ground. He had heard stories from his grandfather about the giant folk who lived in the mountains beyond the forest, but he had always assumed they were just fairy tales told to frighten children. The woman's eyes suddenly opened, revealing irises that shifted color like the northern lights. She tried to sit up but gasped in pain and fell back against the broken trunk of an oak tree. "Please," she whispered, her voice deep and musical but filled with desperation. "Do not fear me. I mean no harm to your kind." Marcus lowered his rifle completely. Despite her enormous size, there was something gentle about her demeanor. The way she spoke was formal and polite, like someone who had been raised with good manners. "You're hurt," Marcus said, stating the obvious. "That wound looks serious." The giant woman nodded slowly. "I fell from the sky realm. My wings. They were damaged in battle. I could not control my descent." She gestured weakly toward her back, where Marcus now noticed what looked like the torn remnants of massive, translucent wings. "Battle?" Marcus asked, moving closer. "Who were you fighting?" "The shadow beasts," she replied, wincing as she tried to adjust her position. "They attacked our kingdom 3 days ago. I am Princess Celeste of the Cloud Realm. I was leading our forces against them when their dark magic struck me down." Marcus stared at her in amazement. A real princess, fallen from the sky and lying injured in his forest. It was like something from the old stories his grandmother used to tell him when he was small. "I need to get you help," Marcus said, "but I don't know any doctors who could treat someone your size." Princess Celeste shook her head. "Human medicine cannot heal my kind, but if you could provide me shelter until my natural healing takes hold, I would be forever in your debt." Marcus looked around the forest clearing. Even if he wanted to help her, how could he move someone so large, and where could he hide a 12-foot-tall princess? "My barn," he said suddenly. "It's old and big, with high ceilings. I could clear out space for you there." The princess smiled, and despite her pain, her face lit up with genuine gratitude. "You would do this for a stranger? For someone not even of your species?" "My grandmother always taught me to help those in need," Marcus replied. "Besides, you said you're fighting shadow beasts. That sounds like you're one of the good guys." Getting Princess Celeste to the barn proved to be quite a challenge, even with her helping as much as her injuries allowed. It took Marcus nearly 2 hours to half carry, half drag her through the forest and across his property. Several times they had to stop so she could rest. her breathing becoming more labored with each step. By the time they reached the barn, both of them were exhausted. Marcus had cleared out his old hay storage area, creating a space large enough for the princess to lie down comfortably. He brought her water from his well and the cleanest blankets he owned. "This is very kind," Princess Celeste said as she settled onto the makeshift bed. "But you should know that helping me may bring danger to your door. The shadow beasts can track my essence, and they will not stop hunting me until I am dead." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, but he tried not to show his fear. "How long before they find you here?" "Perhaps a day. Maybe 2 if we are fortunate," the princess replied. "My magic is weak from the fall, so my essence signature is faint, but it will grow stronger as I heal, making me easier to track." That evening, as Marcus brought the princess some of his simple dinner of bread and vegetable soup, she began to tell him more about her world. The cloud realm existed high above the earth, invisible to human eyes. Her people, the Celestials, had been the guardians of the sky for thousands of years, controlling the weather and protecting the earth from cosmic threats. But 3 months ago, a tier had opened between dimensions, allowing shadow beasts from a dark realm to invade. These creatures fed on light and life itself, turning everything they touched into twisted versions of its former self. They had already conquered 2 of the smaller sky kingdoms and were now attacking the cloud realm directly. "Why don't you ask for help from humans?" Marcus asked. "Surely some of them would fight alongside you." Princess Celeste smiled sadly. "Most humans no longer believe we exist. They think of us as myths and legends, and those few who do know of us fear our power. They would rather hide and hope the shadow beasts never turn their attention to the earth below." Marcus considered this as he watched the princess carefully eat the soup he had brought her. Despite her enormous size, she ate slowly and politely, as if she were dining at a royal banquet instead of sitting in a drafty old barn. "What will happen if the shadow beasts win?" he asked. "The barriers between realms will collapse entirely," she replied grimly. "The shadow beasts will pour down from the sky like a plague of locusts. They will devour every living thing on earth, turning your green world into a wasteland of darkness and despair." That night, Marcus lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything the princess had told him. Part of him wondered if he was losing his mind, if the stress of his financial troubles had finally caused him to hallucinate an entire fantasy adventure. But every time he stepped outside and looked toward the barn, he could see the faint golden glow emanating from between the wooden boards. The princess's pendant continued to pulse with warm light, proof that she was real, and that her story was true. Around midnight, Marcus heard a sound that made his blood freeze. It was like wind chimes made of bones, tinkling in a breeze that didn't exist. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, growing louder and more discordant with each passing moment. He grabbed his rifle and ran to the barn. Princess Celeste was sitting up, her eyes wide with alarm. "They've found us," she whispered. "The shadow beasts are coming." Marcus looked out through a gap in the barn wall and saw them approaching across his fields. They looked like wolves made of living darkness, with eyes like red stars and teeth that gleamed with malevolent light. There were at least a dozen of them, moving in perfect formation like a pack of supernatural hunters. "Can you fight them?" Marcus asked, checking his rifle even though he doubted normal bullets would be effective against creatures made of shadow. Princess Celeste struggled to stand, her wounded shoulder making her movements clumsy and painful. "I am too weak. My magic is barely enough to keep me conscious." The shadow beasts were getting closer. Marcus could hear their otherworldly howls echoing across his property. In a few minutes, they would reach the barn. "Then we run," Marcus said decisively. "There's an old root cellar behind my house. It's hidden underground. Maybe they won't be able to sense you there." But as they prepared to leave the barn, Marcus realized they had waited too long. The shadow beasts had surrounded the building. Through the gaps in the walls, he could see their glowing red eyes and hear their terrible breathing, like wind whistling through a graveyard. Princess Celeste placed her hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You have shown me great kindness, Farmer Marcus, but you should not die for a stranger. Leave me here and save yourself." Marcus looked up at her pale, beautiful face and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "I'm not leaving you," he said firmly. "We'll face whatever comes together." The shadow beasts circled the barn, like wolves stalking their prey. Marcus could hear their claws scraping against the wooden walls as they searched for a way inside. Their red eyes peered through every crack and gap, casting an eerie crimson glow throughout the interior. Princess Celeste closed her eyes and placed her hand on the glowing pendant around her neck. "I still have enough magic for one spell," she whispered. "But it will leave me completely defenseless afterward." "What kind of spell?" Marcus asked, gripping his rifle tighter even though he knew it would be useless against these supernatural creatures. "I can create a light barrier around us," she explained. "The shadow beasts cannot tolerate pure light. It will hold them back for perhaps an hour. But then my magic will be gone entirely." Marcus nodded. "Do it. An hour might be enough time to figure out another plan." The princess pressed her pendant against her chest and began to speak in a language Marcus had never heard before. The words seemed to flow like music, rising and falling in a rhythm that made his heart race. The golden light from her pendant grew brighter and brighter until it filled the entire barn with warm, brilliant radiance. The moment the light touched the walls, the shadow beasts outside began to howl in fury and pain. Marcus heard them retreating to what he assumed was a safe distance, their terrible voices echoing across his property like the cries of banshees. "It is done," Princess Celeste said weakly, slumping back onto her makeshift bed. "But we have perhaps 50 minutes before the barrier fails." Marcus began pacing back and forth, trying to think of a solution. His small farm was miles from the nearest neighbor, and even if he could reach them in time, what could ordinary humans do against shadow beasts? "Tell me more about these creatures," he said. "There has to be a weakness we can exploit." The princess took a deep breath and began to explain. "Shadow beasts are born from pure darkness and negative energy. They cannot create anything, only destroy and consume. Light weakens them, but only temporarily, unless it comes from a source of pure good." "What counts as pure good?" Marcus asked. "Acts of selfless love and sacrifice," she replied. "The willingness to give up everything for someone else without expecting anything in return. That kind of light can destroy shadow beasts permanently." Marcus thought about this as he watched the golden barrier surrounding them. The light pulsed gently, like a heartbeat, but he could already see it beginning to fade around the edges. "Earlier, you said you would be in my debt if I helped you," Marcus said suddenly. "What did you mean by that?" Princess Celeste looked surprised by the question. "In my realm, debts of honor are sacred bonds. If someone saves your life or shows you great kindness, you are bound to repay them in whatever way you can. And you're a princess," Marcus continued. "That means you have power and resources in your kingdom." "I do," she confirmed. "Though I cannot access them while trapped here on Earth." Marcus made a decision. "I want to make a deal with you." The princess raised her eyebrows. "What kind of deal?" "If we both survive this, I want you to help me save my farm," Marcus said. "I'm about to lose everything. The bank is foreclosing in 30 days, and I owe more money than I could earn in 10 lifetimes. Princess Celeste studied his face carefully. "You would risk your life for someone you just met, and all you ask in return is help with your financial troubles. You could ask for gold, or magical powers, or eternal youth." Marcus shrugged. "This farm is all I have. It belonged to my father and his father before him. Without it, I have nothing." "Very well," the princess said solemnly. "I swear by the sacred laws of my people that if we survive this night, I will find a way to save your farm." Just as she spoke these words, the light barrier began to flicker more noticeably. They could hear the shadow beasts growing restless outside, sensing that their protection was failing. 30 minutes left, Princess Celeste estimated. Marcus continued pacing, his mind racing through possibilities. Then he remembered something his grandfather had told him years ago, about the old mine shaft on his property. "There's a place we might be able to hide," he said excitedly. "My grandfather used to tell stories about an old silver mine that runs deep underground. He said miners used to work there during the Civil War, but they abandoned it when they hit an underground spring." "Silver?" The princess's eyes lit up with hope. "Silver has natural protective properties against dark magic. If the mine walls contain enough of it, the shadow beasts might not be able to follow us inside." Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "The entrance is about a quarter-mile from here, hidden in a grove of pine trees. But we'd have to cross open ground to reach it, and you're still injured." "I can make the journey," Princess Celeste said determinedly. "But we must time it perfectly. The moment my light barrier fails, we run." They spent the remaining time preparing for their escape. Marcus gathered supplies, water, his grandmother's old kerosene lantern, some rope, and a first aid kit. The princess used what little strength she had left to bind her wounded shoulder more tightly. As the 20-minute mark approached, the golden light around them became noticeably dimmer. The shadow beasts outside sensed the weakening barrier and began circling closer to the barn. "Remember," Princess Celeste whispered, "no matter what happens, keep moving toward the mine. Do not stop to fight them, and do not look back." Marcus nodded, his heart pounding with anticipation and fear. He had never been in a real fight before, let alone one involving supernatural monsters from another dimension. At exactly the 10-minute mark, the light barrier began to pulse rapidly, like a dying heartbeat. The shadow beast's howls grew louder and more excited. 5 minutes, the princess warned. Marcus positioned himself at the barn door, ready to fling it open the moment the barrier failed. Princess Celeste struggled to her feet, testing her balance and range of motion. 3 minutes. The golden light was now flickering like a candle in a strong wind. Through the gaps in the barn walls, Marcus could see the red eyes of the shadow beasts, gathering just beyond the failing barrier. 1 minute. Get ready. Marcus gripped the door handle, his palms sweating despite the cool night air. Princess Celeste moved up beside him, her face set with determination despite her obvious pain. "Now!" she shouted as the barrier winked out of existence. Marcus threw open the barn door and they burst out into the night. The shadow beasts were caught off guard for just a moment, giving them a precious head start. But within seconds, the creatures were in pursuit, their howls splitting the darkness like sirens. Princess Celeste moved surprisingly quickly for someone her size and condition, her long legs covering ground faster than Marcus would have thought possible, but he could hear her labored breathing and see her stumbling occasionally as they ran across his fields. Behind them, the shadow beasts were gaining ground. Marcus could hear their claws digging into the earth, and their supernatural breathing growing closer with each step. They reached the edge of the pine grove just as the first shadow beast lunged at Princess Celeste's back. Marcus spun around and swung his rifle like a club, the wooden stock passing harmlessly through the creature's shadowy form. But the gesture distracted it long enough for the princess to keep moving. "There!" Marcus shouted, pointing toward a dark opening in the hillside that was barely visible between the trees. The mine entrance. They crashed through the underbrush, branches tearing at their clothes and faces. The shadow beasts were right behind them now, their red eyes burning like coals in the darkness. Princess Celeste reached the mine entrance first and dove inside, her large frame barely fitting through the opening. Marcus was right behind her, throwing himself into the tunnel just as he felt the hot breath of a shadow beast on his neck. The moment they crossed the threshold into the mine, something remarkable happened. The walls around them began to glow with a soft silver light, and the shadow beasts outside let out screams of pain and fury. They clawed at the entrance but could not cross into the tunnel. Marcus and Princess Celeste collapsed on the rocky floor, gasping for breath and listening to the frustrated howls of their pursuers outside. "The silver in the walls," the princess panted. "It's creating a barrier they cannot cross." They had escaped, but they were now trapped underground with no way of knowing when it would be safe to emerge. As Marcus lit his lantern and looked around at the ancient mining tunnels, stretching into the darkness, he wondered if they had simply traded one prison for another. But at least they were alive, and Princess Celeste had given her word to help save his farm. Now they just had to survive long enough for her to keep that promise. The silver mine stretched deeper into the earth than Marcus had ever imagined. His lantern cast dancing shadows on the walls, revealing veins of precious metal that sparkled like stars in the rock face. Princess Celeste had to duck constantly to avoid hitting her head on the low ceiling. But the silver deposits in the walls kept the shadow beasts at bay. They had been underground for 3 hours when they heard the first rumble of thunder above them. Princess Celeste lifted her head, listening intently to sounds that Marcus couldn't detect. "My people are coming," she said with relief in her voice. "That is not earthly thunder. It is the sound of celestial war drums." Marcus felt a mixture of hope and anxiety. "Will they be able to defeat the shadow beasts?" "Perhaps," the princess replied. "But first they must find us. And I fear my brother may do something rash if he believes I am dead." As if summoned by her words, a new voice echoed through the mine shaft. It was deep and powerful, speaking in the same musical language Marcus had heard the princess use earlier. But this voice carried an edge of anger that made the very walls vibrate. "Prince Aurelius," Princess Celeste whispered. "He has found our location." Suddenly, The mine entrance blazed with brilliant white light. Marcus had to shield his eyes as a figure even taller than the princess descended into the tunnel. Prince Aurelius was nearly 14 feet tall, with golden hair and armor that seemed to be made from captured sunlight. His wings, unlike his sister's torn ones, were magnificent and whole, spreading nearly 20 feet from tip to tip. "Sister," he called out, relief evident in his voice despite his obvious anger. "We feared you were lost to us forever." Princess Celeste struggled to stand as her brother approached. "Aurelius, I am well. This human has protected me and shown me great kindness." The prince's eyes, which glowed like miniature suns, fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made him want to hide behind a rock. "Is this true, small one? You have aided my sister despite the danger to yourself?" Marcus found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "She was hurt. I couldn't just leave her." Prince Aurelius studied Marcus for a long moment, and then something unexpected happened. The enormous celestial warrior dropped to one knee, bringing himself closer to Marcus's eye level. "Then you have earned the eternal gratitude of the Cloud Realm," he said solemnly. "Name your reward, brave farmer, and if it is within our power, it shall be granted." Marcus glanced at Princess Celeste, who nodded encouragingly. "Your sister already promised to help me save my farm. I'm about to lose everything I own." Prince Aurelius raised his eyebrows in surprise. "That is all? You could ask for vast wealth, magical powers, or even a place among our people in the sky realm." "I just want to keep my home," Marcus said firmly. The prince and princess exchanged a look that seemed to communicate volumes. Finally, Prince Aurelius smiled, the first expression of warmth Marcus had seen from him. "Your humility honors you," the prince said. "Very well. But know that the Cloud Realm pays its debts in full measure. You shall have much more than you asked for." They emerged from the mine to find the entire landscape transformed. The shadow beasts lay scattered across Marcus's fields, their forms dissolving into wisps of black smoke. Overhead, the sky was filled with celestial warriors, their armor gleaming in the pre-dawn light as they pursued the remaining creatures. "The battle is nearly won," Prince Aurelius explained. "We managed to close the dimensional tear that allowed these abominations to enter our realm. Those that remain will be hunted down within the hour." As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Princess Celeste took Marcus by the hand. Her touch was warm and gentle despite her enormous size. "Come with us to the Cloud Realm," she said. "It is time to honor our promise." Prince Aurelius gestured toward a magnificent chariot that descended from the clouds. It was pulled by creatures that looked like horses made of pure starlight, their manes flowing like cosmic wind. The chariot itself appeared to be carved from a single massive pearl that gleamed with inner light. Marcus had never been more than 50 miles from his farm in his entire life, and now he was being invited to travel to another dimension. His legs felt weak as he climbed into the ethereal vehicle. The journey to the Cloud Realm was unlike anything Marcus could have imagined. They rose through layers of clouds that felt solid beneath the chariot's wheels, passing through what the princess called the veil between worlds. When they finally emerged, Marcus gasped in wonder. The Cloud Realm was a vast kingdom built on foundations of crystallized cloud, with palaces and towers that seemed to be made from captured rainbow light. Gardens floated in the air without any visible support, filled with flowers that sparkled like gemstones. Waterfalls flowed upward instead of down, creating spiraling pillars of mist that danced through the air. The palace itself was beyond description. Its walls were transparent like glass but stronger than any earthly material, offering views of the cosmos that stretched out in all directions. Stars wheeled overhead so close that Marcus felt he could reach out and touch them. "Welcome to our home," Princess Celeste said as they entered a great hall, where dozens of celestials had gathered to greet them. The next few hours passed in a blur of introductions and explanations. Marcus met the Cloud King, a wise and ancient ruler whose very presence seemed to radiate peace and wisdom. He learned about celestial culture, their history, and their role as guardians of multiple realms. But it was when they took him to the treasury of worlds that Marcus truly understood the magnitude of their gratitude. "Every realm we protect contributes something of value to our treasury," Prince Aurelius explained as they walked through chambers filled with wonders beyond imagination. Gems that sing, metals that heal, crystals that store pure energy. All of it is available for our use in maintaining the balance between worlds. They stopped in front of a wall covered in what looked like glowing maps. Princess Celeste placed her hand on one of them, and Marcus realized he was looking at his own world from an impossible perspective. "This is the Earth monitoring chamber," she explained. "From here, we can see every corner of your world and influence events when necessary." The princess moved her hand over the map, and Marcus watched in amazement as the view zoomed in on his own property. He could see his small farmhouse, his failing crops, even the bills scattered on his kitchen table. "Your debt is to something called First National Bank," Princess Celeste observed. "The amount owed is significant for a human of your station." Prince Aurelius studied the magical display with interest. "This bank appears to be owned by a corporation, which is in turn owned by other entities. The trail of ownership leads to—" He paused, his expression growing thoughtful. "Interesting. The ultimate owner is a man who has caused considerable suffering through his greed." "What are you thinking, brother?" the princess asked. "Justice," Prince Aurelius replied with a smile that would have made the shadow beasts flee in terror. "It seems our friend Marcus is not the only victim of this particular villain." Over the next hour, Marcus watched in fascination as the royal siblings worked their magic on his problems. Using their influence over earthly elements, they guided the discovery of a massive silver deposit directly beneath his property. The same mine where they had hidden from the shadow beasts turned out to contain enough precious metal to make Marcus wealthy beyond his wildest dreams. But they didn't stop there. Prince Aurelius used his control over wind and weather to ensure that Marcus's next crops would be the most bountiful in the region's history. Princess Celeste blessed his land with a protection spell that would keep it fertile and productive for generations. "The man who owns your bank," Prince Aurelius said as he completed his work, "has been engaged in illegal activities that your government's investigators have been unable to prove. I have arranged for certain evidence to come to light." Within hours, news reports began flooding in about the arrest of the bank's owner on charges of fraud and embezzlement. The bank itself was taken over by federal regulators, and all debts owed by small farmers, including Marcus, were forgiven as part of the legal settlement. But the greatest surprise came when Princess Celeste presented Marcus with a small crystal pendant similar to her own. "This will allow you to communicate with us across the dimensional barrier," she explained. "Should you ever need our help again, simply hold the crystal and speak our names. I also serve as liaison between the cloud realm and worthy humans," Prince Aurelius added. "You will find that good fortune follows you wherever you go. Your farm will prosper, your crops will never fail, and you will want for nothing." As the time came for Marcus to return to Earth, he felt a strange mixture of sadness and excitement. He was saying goodbye to the most extraordinary friends he had ever made, but he was returning to a life transformed beyond recognition. The journey home was just as magical as the trip to the cloud realm. As they descended through the layers of clouds, Marcus could see news trucks and reporters gathering around his property. Word of the silver discovery had already reached the media. "Remember," Princess Celeste said as they landed near his farmhouse, "you saved a life and asked for nothing in return. This is what happens when pure good meets the power of those who can reshape reality." Marcus climbed down from the starlight chariot and turned to wave goodbye to his celestial friends. As they rose back into the sky, becoming indistinguishable from the morning stars, he realized that his life had changed in ways he was only beginning to understand. The pile of bills still sat on his kitchen table, but they were no longer a source of stress. The bank notice still threatened foreclosure, but Marcus knew it would never be enforced. Outside his window, he could see the first green shoots of what would become the most successful farm in the county's history. But more importantly, he had learned that kindness and courage could open doors to worlds beyond imagination. As he touched the crystal pendant around his neck, Marcus smiled and began planning how he would use his newfound prosperity to help other struggling farmers in his community. After all, he had learned from the best teachers in the universe that the greatest magic happens when someone chooses to help others without expecting anything in return. The poor farmer who had hidden a wounded giant princess had indeed seen all his debts wiped away by dawn, but he had gained something even more valuable: the knowledge that there was still magic in the world, and that sometimes the most ordinary person could become part of an extraordinary story.